Have you ever wondered how to keep your bid team from burning out, or how to actually pay them in ways that drive better results, or even just how to tell a client politely, no, let's not respond to this RFP? Today, I have two voices from Tendium. We have Elliot Easton, a very experienced bid manager, and Oliver Streams, who is the head of managed services, who's all about operational excellence. Together, they are going to share smart, practical lessons on building healthier, more effective proposal teams. And without losing your sanity in the process, stick around and you'll leave, I promise, rethinking about how you run bids and a bid team. Yeah, thanks so much for being on the podcast. So I really wanted to talk to you both because you have a really unique position because you both work at, a tender company, but you also, Oliver, you run a bid team, and Elliot, you respond to RFPs on behalf of Tendium's clients. So it's a really unique situation. And I think a lot of people who are listening to this podcast are in somewhat similar situations because they are like you, Elliot. They're working for like big consultancy who are responding to their clients' RFPs. So it's going to be a different industry, a different company every single time. Or like Oliver, who is managing a team for a big consultancy. Yeah, and Elliot, I'm wondering when you manage bids, especially for enterprise SaaS customers, like what patterns do you see in how buyers behave? And what do they often misunderstand about client side decision making?
I mean, I would say it's part and parcel of being a bid manager is being a good stakeholder engager and being able
Yeah.
to really manage your or manage the expectations. Um, I think a lot of the time I'm as much a sales advisor as I'm a bid manager and trying to not educate because that's maybe a bit too strong, but guide and softly position bids as go or no goes because a salesperson or a sales rep who I'm engaging with who's bringing me an RFP might not have the same level of understanding of how the buyer is going to evaluate the bid, what it means to be non-compliant. I think the main issue I see from our customers is a willingness to proceed even in bad circumstances and needing
Yeah.
to play the bad guy in a way, coming into a meeting and sort of saying, look, I understand that this is a great strategic sort of an opportunity for you. It could fuel the business for the next 2 years, but you have no chance of winning. So I would say that role of being the authority in the room to sort of say, let's not do this. Like this is not the right thing, even when it impacts me financially, right? And like
Yeah.
our team benefits from doing more, but we need to maintain a strong relationship with our clients as well as guiding them in best practices and also being transparent.
Yeah, yeah, there is a big difference, especially in the EU space. I um I know that almost every single proposal and bid person has been in that same situation, whether they're in-house or working for a client, having those really tough go no go conversations. I think I have probably made salespeople cry when they know I'm going to be in those in those calls because I am quite tough about them. But of course, you have to maintain like a really good relationship with your clients as you're doing that. I know many of the people listening to this are in the exact same situation. So if let's say you get a really, I guess, really poor fit RFP or ITT that you know you're going to lose, what do you do? Like, how do you maintain that relationship but still, guide them towards the right decision for them?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it usually starts with listing risks and liabilities, both for them and then for myself as well, and explaining to them that, look, we don't have this information. You don't have this information. This is not areas where you are compliant. These are the risks that you be faced with if you proceed. I know it's not a very fun answer to have, but it depends on the client and who they are and how big they are and what sector they're in. You know, if it's a very niche product and we're looking in the private sector, there might be wiggle room. You might be able to sort of qualify something, even if my gut feeling isn't, oh, this is going to be a chance of success. In the public sector, I think it's easier to really show a clear yes no breakdown. And one way I've done that in the past, especially in the public sector, is have an initial meeting with my client, outline questions that they are curious about concerning blockers that I know are going to be an issue, phrase these in a way which makes sense, put them to the buyer, and essentially wait for the buyer to respond to the Q&A period to then return these to my client and say, look, they're not going to accept any workarounds. They're not going to accept any wiggle room. Like, you're going to have to play by these rules.
Yep.
And the client typically after a while then will relent and say, okay, yeah, maybe we'll find something else. I think from our internal end though, in terms of like how we work with our customers, I mean, a lot of it is about limiting our liability, our risk, and make sure that like the service we deliver is always qualitative, right? I mean, we consider ourselves like a partner to our clients rather than like a full outsourcing, right? So I think the fundamental thing of any partnership is communication. Being able to communicate openly, you need to be able to have trust. I need to be able to voice my concerns and have them actually understood and seen as actual concerns and not just as someone who doesn't want to go grow business. And that means that from our expectations on our client, we expect a lot of touch points. We expect being kept in the loop and almost being regarded as like an extended team to their internal organization, rather than just the consultants on the side doing the bids. And really, I mean, to introduce that partnered perspective that we want to go for in almost all instances, we sort of work on the premise that shared systems, shared documentation, shared information, like transparency and openness between us so that they can have access to our valuation models, to our assessment, to our risk assessments, to our liability assessments, so that they feel that, you know, we're working according to their premises rather than we're working from a shady consultant in the background who's just coming in and saying no, yes, no, and then charging them a fee, right? So I'd say that's usually how I'd handle those negotiations or conversation.
And I
Yeah.
think
No, I like how you said negotiation. Sorry, Oliver, go ahead.
I was going to build on Elliot's point there. I think it almost comes back to when we structure the deals in the first instance as well. We want to be incentivized in the same way. So we don't just want to be incentivized to do volume, irrespective of whether it's a good fit. We've got a good chance of winning. We want to be incentivized and structure the deal so that we want to submit good volume where it's relevant, but we also want to submit with the best chance of winning. They're all on that same page in terms of, yeah, we want to win and we want to.
Yeah, fair enough. That kind of goes to my next question is obviously you don't want to just respond for your customer. You don't want to just respond for your client. So I'm curious what a healthy and modern client vendor bid relationship looks like right now. And I want answers from both of you, but Oliver, if you could give me your opinion first.
Echoing what Elliot said previously, it's a partnership rather than a straight outsource. We want to act as an extension of their team, not something completely separate. And as part of that, the communication, the transparency, and the clear visibility into how it's working on our end, how their end also ties into the overall process. So I think where we're able to take the role of almost like a project manager and treat each response as if it is its own project, then the clarity is there, everyone's on the same page. And I think that's really important. The visibility into the processes, the decisions, the outcomes.
So basically you start out right from the beginning, like, here's where we fit. This is what we expect from you. This is what we're going to do. You just set it up right from the beginning. Is that?
Yeah, and I think one of our key things, especially for our larger enterprise customers, because we're working with different account executives, different salespeople on every single RFP, it's essential for us to have that buy-in from the very beginning so that individual has some skin in the game. So whether that's via messaging, preferably it's via a call, so we can actually get in front of them face to face, explain how things are going to work and make sure that they are invested. Early on, when we were still kind of figuring this out, we didn't always rigorously stick to that process. And we could find ourselves in situations where we've put hours of work into a bid. The salesperson's gone AWOL. They thought it was a complete outsourcing, and we're finding ourselves a few days before submission where they're not ready to provide what's required of them. And ultimately, you can miss the deadline, which is obviously the worst case scenario. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
it's really key.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to repeat everything you said, Ollie, because I obviously agree. I would say just building on that, like, especially within enterprise SaaS, bids offer you like an invaluable resource for outlining technology roadmaps and like actually, you know, if you're targeting a certain sector or a certain segment of region or say we're looking into selling software into medtech, bids may contain areas that you want to consider adding to your software. And I very often sit down with maybe more technical individuals who maybe aren't working on the RFPs themselves, but to just offer us insights of like, this is the volume of data that we have based on previous engagements by your company. And this is what we would think would really benefit your product and would increase your chances of winning. And I think that is another level of that partnership. We offer both the bid services and RFP services, but we also offer more, right? Like we can provide data-driven insights. We can provide sort of a consistent level of feedback based upon how you're performing in the market in terms of winning new business and sort of how we're being evaluated by buyers, whether public or private.
No, I really appreciate that. I'm just wondering what your advice would be for a bid consultant who often gets into these situations where they start meeting with a new client, they start responding with a new client, and they're just not getting the level of feedback or respect even from their client in responding to these RFPs.
Oh, it's a tough one.
Yeah, it is
The
tough.
the the easy answer is stick at it, right? Continue to be loud and vocal, and I think stick to what you know as a bid manager. Sort of play to your strengths. Try and align yourself with key stakeholders, right? So I think we have, in a lot of cases with our clients, have contact with some very key stakeholders within their organization who become our internal champions and who can really expand what we offer. And I mean, sitting down with an AWOL going RFP AE who's brought me an opportunity and says this is going to change the business, and I have to try and chase them to tell them you aren't adding the details that I need you to add, you aren't aligning me with, you know, the right people within your internal organization. It's something I face every day, and I don't think there's a be all end all solution to it. But I think just being vocal, consistently directing that communication, and finding that key champion within that organization to really take you on. And that can be, as Oliver said, through consistent messaging, through sitting down in calls, through actually sort of interfacing with your customers as much as you're doing the bid work, because you really want to build out that partnership relationship with them to make sure that one, it's returning business for us and that we can build and grow on it. But two, it enables a faster and smoother way of working together.
So we just spoke about what you and the client relationship looks like and how to manage that. But so how do you strike the right balance between automation and proposals and bids right now and of course the hands-on experience in responding to bids for clients?
It's largely based upon what I would say a common sense approach. It might seem easy to just like include automation tooling and automation productivity software and solutions in like a bid related workflow, but really that only gets you so far, in my opinion. So I can automate my bid work, but ultimately I have to remain hands on with the bid to ensure that the context of the tender is clear, that the customer strategy is clear, where are we going? Because all of that feeds into how I use those automation tools and how I use those productivity tools. I know it might sound vague, but realistically, it's like the actual bid work, at least from a software perspective, a lot of it is just production of content that can be quite quickly managed. Understanding how we want to produce it is probably the key cornerstone of what I spend a lot of my time with, right? So sitting down with my customers and understanding, okay, this is where we're at right now in your company. What's your trajectory in 3 years? Where are you looking to expand? Can we figure out how we want to position your response to this tender in a way that gets you there faster? What drivers do you see as critical for your own business? And then taking back that context and feeding it into the tooling that we use to actually make that productivity tooling and automation AI do the work for us in the right way rather than just shoving it all into ChatGPT and saying, write me a bid. That's not going to
Right.
help us.
Do your clients tend to want you to come in and almost be a guide as to how to start using automation because within bids because it is still relatively new and of course it is changing on a pretty rapid basis.
I suppose with our specialism being in SaaS and software, particularly, that kind of uniquely positions us somewhat because I mean our customers they're wanting to use AI and automation within the products they're selling. When
Yeah.
it comes to the bidding themselves, I split it out. From our end, I see it as the automation enables us to scale and become more efficient in the work that we do. But ultimately, the relationship is key to the engagement and the partnerships. And you're never going to be able to automate the relationship, right? It's face to face, and it can only be done by individuals. And without that relationship, it doesn't really matter how good you are at bidding, because I think ultimately they're looking to the individuals to provide the service. You definitely have to be conscious of striking the right balance, because I think if you start sort of showing to the customer just reels of automation and you're losing that human touch and the relationship is sort of getting pushed further and further away, I think that would actually be quite detrimental to the overall engagement.
And I think a lot of bid people would agree with you. I'm just also curious because both of you are so embedded in the EU tender space specifically. And what they're doing in the EU is really aligned to what the US public sector is doing in terms of procurement using AI to shortlist bids, honestly. So I'm just wondering what you're seeing in your space.
I mean, from my side, although we're based in the EU, I work very much globally. So I spend a
Yeah.
lot of time working on bids, public and private sector, in APJ, ANZ, MENA, LATAM, even NAM to some extent, and then also the EU. I think from the evaluation side, it's something that from Tendium's side is like a bid tech enterprise customer.
Yeah.
We obviously understand it from a completely different perspective, and I think it aligns with like a more structured way of evaluating bids. I would say it has its detriments as well. I mean, it opens up to having very rigid and strict ways of evaluating bids with very odd models, right? And I think there's a balance to be found that hasn't yet been found in the EU of how do you blend manual human evaluation versus AI assisted evaluation of tenders.
I could just add a little bit to that. Sort of over the past sort
Yeah.
of few years, I've definitely seen a shift from a focus a few years ago where it was kind of, we want to push out glossy corporate marketing materials as part of the bid. But with the introduction of AI in terms of evaluating responses, that's obviously not interested in any glossy corporate marketing material, right? It's more very rigid in terms of that's the evaluation criteria. You're going to get a hard score against price, a hard score against functionality. So you're looking at it more as like a tick box exercise rather than providing this nice overall package that's going to be evaluated by an entire business.
Yeah. And I know because you were just talking about how the relationship is still the most important thing, but then how do you then structure your response to get shortlisted or to meet all the criteria to pass the AI reviewer to
Yeah,
get to the human?
I mean the Q&A period, right? Like the Q&A period gives you that ability to try and influence and really push in and be like, will you accept these additional materials? They will really show why our bid is the one that deserves to be shortlisted. And if not, try and eke out space within that checklist exercise to really try and push your offering as, you know, outstanding and different from others. I would say that although like maybe the glossy marketing brochures and materials have diminished, there is still like a request for quite a lot of detailed information around the bidder, which isn't structured, nowhere more so than in describe your methodologies. I mean, that's such an open-ended question of like, and that is a perfect question where you can really make yourself represented in the way that you want to. And I think those are, even though they're being evaluated by AI, that's where the AI can actually take in that glossy marketing material that you put together, the nice copy that you've created, and actually formulate it in a way of like, you have to do it strategically. You have to look at the keywords being used. You have to look at the positioning of the RFP, consider your competitors, consider your market landscape, consider the buyer. But you can format and phrase it in a way which actually makes sense to aid you in that shortlisting process.
Oliver, just like what processes or rituals you have to keep your bid team moving fast without burning out, especially considering they're working with multiple clients, multiple deadlines, multiple locations. So it's
Yeah,
it's a tough job.
absolutely. And yeah, I mean, the key thing thing in there is that they're working high volume, high stress, high pressure. It's short turnarounds, lots of work at any one time. So yeah, it's something that I'm very conscious of and very conscious to think about ways to both motivate them and ensure that this like burnout doesn't exist. And I think for me, and Elliot, of course, feel free to disagree, communication and structure is very, very important. We are only a small team. So right now there is 4 of us, but we just had a 5th edition join. So I think it's important to be quite defined in terms of who's responsible for what and how we prioritize the deliverables. So although we are a hybrid remote team, we have open communication lines and regular meetings to make sure that we're always on the same page. I'm based out of London, the team based in Stockholm. We're on video called pretty much every day in one way or another. So we have that kind of close communication. And I think from my end and building on that, it's really critical to give the team members ownership and responsibility over their work. There's no micromanagement, very flexible. It doesn't matter if you're clocking in at 9 and leaving at 5. It's more the work needs to be done. How you decide to do that, well, that's up to you. And I think that ownership of the process and the work is really important for the team members to feel that they have control around how they're doing things. Building on that, I think, at least the way I like to run it, the overall comp plan, I run the bid team as a commercial business. So this means that when the team is winning, or when our overall team is winning, the individuals are also winning, right? So coming back to the point around incentives being aligned, we're all kind of incentivized in the same way. Those times when there's multiple bids, it's late in an evening and you know you've got to get it out the next morning, you know that work and effort that you're putting in now will be rewarded. And yeah, in terms of setting it up as a sales organization, it's interesting, but I see tenders and RFPs as part of the overall sales process, which hasn't always been kind of the vision of upper management within the organizations. But I think for me, it's important to see it that way, and that from there, the bid managers should be compensated in a similar way to salespeople. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult because you don't have as much control about closing the deals, but you do have control over the volume and the quality.
So Oliver, you and I have spoken about this before, and I am obsessed with that idea. I wish everyone did that. And I know that there are so many proposal and bid team leaders who would love to do that too. What would you suggest they do to maybe get their leadership bought into this comp plan and way of doing things?
Yeah, so I think it's important to convey the message to upper management of the role that bids and RFPs actually play within a sales organization. And if you can clearly demonstrate the financial output of the work, I think that's quite an easy way to get the buy-in from management if they actually can change their mindset and view it as a viable line of increasing business alongside the sales team. I think once you get that buy-in, then it's quite easy to structure the entire bid team as just an extension of the commercial organization. I think another element to that is actually working quite closely with sales, because there are obviously crossovers. We see it not just in Tendium, but in all the organizations we work with, that quite often RFPs and tenders, right, they land with the salespeople. They're not professional bid writers. They're kind of overwhelmed with how to respond. So
yeah,
by extension, the RFP team should sit very close to sales, and then it just kind of makes sense, right, that they're treated the same in terms of overall compensation.
Yeah, I don't know if I've always put together bid and proposal teams. They're always burned out, the vast majority of the time. And it is because it's just really deadline driven. There's a lot at stake for so many reasons. Yeah, I'm just never quite put together that maybe the incentives just aren't always there as well to kind of help motivate you in that same way. So, Oliver, thank you. You've opened up my eyes. But yeah, so I think, just to summarize, to help your team not get too burned out, although I think it's impossible to not completely, is that really open communication, being flexible with your timelines with your people, not having to just sit in a chair from 9 to 5. I agree with that completely. Then also having really good compensation plans, incentivizations, and then working closely with the sales team with the respect that the sales team gets for the proposal people. Did I
I think the
100%.
only thing that I would add to that as well, and this is just something that we do at Tendium, it's celebrating the wins of the proposal team company-wide, much like the wins of the sales team are celebrated. So again, it's just bringing us even closer to that sales process and sales way of working But I don't know how it looks in other organizations, but bid and proposal teams can sometimes kind of just like disappear, be disregarded. So I think celebrating that and gaining the respect and appreciation across the organization is super important.
So how do you do that? How do you do the celebrations? What does that look like?
So we have kind of like central communication channels where all commercial successes are shared. So in that sense, we're exactly the same as when a sales made. Our wins, contracts, successful bids are also celebrated in the same way. And yeah, in company-wide meetings, which at the moment we have weekly, again, the successes are shared. So it's that communication out to the wider organization.
I mean, I
Very,
would
very cool. Oh, go ahead,
just
Elliot.
add to that as well. We're a relatively small organization. I mean, we've grown quickly. So I joined Tendium almost 3 years ago, and we've grown by more than 200% in terms of the number of people that we're at.
Yeah.
So 3 years ago, it was very easy to celebrate your successes because you would just stand up and talk to everyone in the office. Now it's slightly more formalized, but I mean, the recognition goes a long way. So that when our internal marketing team, when I speak to them, they consider us as a fundamental part of the commercial organization within Tendium, rather than just those people who do bids. We're not really sure what they are. We're a central part to that commercial arm, and I think that's very important. I think it's very important as a bid manager to be given agency, so that you mentioned not being micromanaged, and that can be in both your working hours, but it can also be in I'm the best judge of if this bid is worth it or not. I don't want to have to go to a manager to say, can I disqualify this bid to our client based upon the relationship? I have to be able to take those conversations and discussions directly with our customers as well. And I think that delegation of agency and authority towards the client and customer is also instrumental, because it means that if I'm in control of how I'm working and what I'm working on, it gives me the ability to dictate tempo, and that prevents burnout and prevents overburdening. And
Yeah, it's almost like as adults, we don't want to be babysat. It's something that we're really good at. And yet that's almost a hard thing to find. Elliot, this next question is for you. It really is about if there is a specific RFP habit or workflow that you think needs to just disappear, and would you replace it with something else?
I mean, so the first one that comes to mind is an arbitrary word count or character limit for any response. Now, I know that's like a buyer dictated thing, but I mean, it's infuriating, especially when it's like a super large question. And an example that comes to mind is like recently I was working on a tender for one of the customers of ours who provides a software service including AI functionality and AI tooling and solutions. And the question I was working to respond is, explain your AI. And I was giving a limit of 150 characters. And I mean, what is that response going to really provide the buyer with in terms of information? I mean, ultimately, I think the buyer is better off if they're just allowed bid managers to use common sense. If a bid manager is putting together a 20-page response to that single question, take that into consideration, maybe from a negative point of view. But I mean, if we're talking like internal workflows and like how I work on RFPs and tenders, and I think it's a difficult question to say kill one. I'd rather say refresh and revitalize. And I think a lot of that is around adoption of new tools and adoptions of new processes, both for me and then within the wider team. Because if we're able to streamline and make things more efficient and lean, we can increase the volume and we can increase the win rate. And that ultimately is what I'm wanting to do, right? So I think internal habits and workflows, it's not so much about killing them. They're all part of the bid world that we work in, but it's more about vitalizing, refreshing them, making them better. And then the things I want to eliminate, they're almost all format and buyer related, right? 150 characters. Try and summarize this podcast in 150 characters. It's like, it's just it's only a few words, really. So,
Yeah, I think that they'd want us to like basically put War and Peace into a
yeah.
summary. So if we could. I'm also wondering, this is a question for both of you, and that is obviously you work at Tendium, which has a ton of data just in general. And so I'm wondering like if there's a surprising stat or trend your data shows that contradicts how most teams operate.
I'm a big fan of extended qualitative responses rather than simply yes, no responses. I think that it has shown in the past when we've delivered bids where we spend more time and effort into crafting, say we're working in a software RFP and it's a long Excel of 250 requirements, crafting a compelling response to each line has often proved more successful than simply ticking a box and saying yes, completely met, however you would phrase it. I think that is a key thing of understanding the target audience that you're selling to as well, because that might not be the case if I'm, working for a customer in selling, say, physical consultants. They're not interested in sort of the same level of detail for a ESG questionnaire. They're looking more so to understand the qualitative responses on one thing, then another company, and then on the other side of it. But I would also say that sort of something that I've seen a lot now, which I maybe is a recommendation to bid writers, is the prevalence of buyers asking whether or not AI tooling has been used to write bids.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to keep in mind because I've strategized around how we should approach it is we consider it an opportunity for the customer to show their comprehension and strength and understanding of AI rather than getting worried and afraid and saying, oh, let's not use AI at all, especially in software, right? If you're selling a solution, if you're trying to write an RFP for a solution that is inherently using AI, it would make sense to use AI to write the bid, but be very clear and evidence your actual understanding and comprehension of the tools that you're using. And then obviously gauge that against the buyer. If you're selling to a buyer who has no understanding of AI, maybe they're just afraid.
When you do the Q&A with the buyer, do you bring this up just to gauge where they're at?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I identify this as part of an RFP, in that first initial stakeholder meeting, that's my approach. Sort of saying, okay, how do you want to approach this? Do you want to go hard in and say, look, we are an AI-driven company. We have AI-powered solutions. This is how we use it. And this is how we've used our solution to answer your bid. Or do we want to come at it and from a completely different perspective and saying, no AI has been used. We've only understood that AI should be used in bid settings for reviewing documents, but no textual responses or formatting has been yada yada. And then really give that to the customer to determine how they feel the approach should be dictated. From my data anyway, it's becoming more and more prevalent in RFPs, in the EU at least, more so in public sector than private, but still growing in both sides.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I first saw that question, it was, yeah, like 2 years ago. Like, and I didn't know how to respond because it was so new. I was like, am I going to get in trouble if I say yes? Will I get in trouble if I say no? But Oliver, I'm wondering like what if you've seen any data as well from Tendium's side.
Yeah, I would agree around the questions around AI. And I think further to that as well, we've also seen some questions about have you engaged the services of a bid writer to help produce this response? If we kind of work back from that, I'm kind of thinking, are the buyers just concerned that they're going to get 10 responses to the RFP that are basically identical, but just with the vendor's name changed? I assume that is probably their main concern if everyone's using bid writers and all of those bid writers are using AI. So it's definitely an interesting trend that we're seeing because your experience, you first saw it 2 years ago. Prior to that, it's never anything that we've really seen before. And obviously bid writers have been around for a long time. So I never seemed to be a particular concern previously. So I don't know if this is born out of maybe bad experience or...
There was probably like some procurement conference where they were told to ask that question.
Yeah,
Just
I'm sure.
I mean, just to build a little bit more, I mean, I think I saw this argument being made on Stargazy, but the way that people use AI and the way they engage with AI tools is in and of itself different, right? None of us are using AI in the exact same way. And if you have multiple bid managers working on a bid, that's multiple personalities, multiple different ways working on a bid. So realistically, using AI, it doesn't create one uniform response. It just creates multiple personalities using AI differently in a very similar way that, multiple bid managers working on a large bid would do anyway. And so that fear that is being shown to me, shows like a complete misunderstanding of how bid managers work and how the actual tooling that we're using actually aids us. And I think if you draw a comparison to schools of like the same 35 essays on Pride and Prejudice being generated by one AI tool using the same question prompt and then producing the same response and sending that in. That's, I mean, arguably, I don't see that as being the case in bid evaluations. I mean, when I do FOIA requests and see bids that have been submitted, that's not what I see. So I think that fear is quite misgrounded from the buyer's perspective.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. I also think that if there are teams who are using AI poorly, that's going to just be borne out in the response anyway. But also before AI, if someone didn't really know how to respond to RFPs very well, they put in a poor response anyway. This one just probably has better grammar. Well, it was lovely to chat with both of you. And if anybody wants to ask Elliot and Oliver any questions about their experience and what they've seen, especially on these topics, then there will be an AMA with them in the community. So just go and speak with them there. It was lovely to talk with you both.
Fantastic. Thanks
Likewise.
very much.
All right, that's it for our conversation with Elliot and Oliver from Tendium. Big thanks to them. But if you liked what you heard, don't let it end here. Go connect with Elliot and Oliver on LinkedIn, check out what Tendium is building, and join the conversation with other proposal leaders who are inside the Stargazy community. They're going to be there answering questions if it's the week of this coming out. And until next time, keep your teams winning and maybe winning with a little less tears.